Okay, moving right along now. This time we're in the small blind. It folds around to us, and I go ahead and open it up for a raise. And the big blind, who we've been tangling with quite a bit now, decides to defend and heads up to the flop. But it's a pretty good flop for our range. We can have a lot of ace-x. We can have some queen-x. Our opponent hasn't 3-bet pre-flop, so we certainly have a range and nut advantage on this board. That being the case, I would mix in some checks and bets with our stronger holdings. And so with this weaker hand here, I decide to add this into a check delay c-bet category. I think it fits reasonably well because I would do that with a lot of hands like ace-5 sometimes, or king-queen. I might check flop bet turn because I don't think we're going to get 3 streets of value very often. So it does just give our opponent a chance to stab when we do have a stronger hand. And in this instance, I do look to delay c-bet, but we actually pick up a 7. It's actually pretty good because we probably have the best hand now a lot of the time. There's definitely some merit to betting because we can protect our hand from those annoying river cards that might hit like a king, jack, or 10. But at the same time, we've got a fairly weak hand, so let's just play a small pot, and I look to do that and just try and bluff catch here. Our opponent does bet the turn. Third pot, and so I go ahead and call, and the river is a king of clubs. It's actually not really that bad a card because I think a lot of king highs will just check turn and look to get to showdown, and I think a lot of flushes probably would have just bet, if our opponent has something like 8-9 of clubs, they probably just bet the flop. And so unless they've got a hand like 10 jack, but I mean, seems kind of unlikely as well. So that being the case, I think it's really close here whether we should call or not. But I just think that we do have a 7 blocker, which is reasonable. We don't block any of the flushes, which is also reasonable. I guess you could make an argument that that's good for calling as well as bluffing. So I think it's kind of close, but I do think this is pretty much the bottom of our range that gets to showdown in this way. And that being the case, it's always good to, when you're at the bottom of your range, to consider turning that sort of hand into a bluff. And that's what I go ahead and do here and jam and put our opponent under pressure. And you've got to remember that we still have a pretty good range advantage and nut advantage here because our opponent did not 3-bet pre-flop and just check back on the flop. Whereas we can certainly take this line with aces, ace queen, queens, ace 7, kings, ace king, ace jack, jack 9 of clubs. We can still have a lot of strong hands in our range that would take this line. And so being that the case and that we got to the showdown within this instance, one of the weakest parts of our range, I think it does make sense to turn it into a bluff. If we put ourselves in our opponent's shoes, I mean, what are they really thinking we've got here? I mean, I guess they might cry call with a hand like ace-5 of diamonds where they're just hoping they're chopping, with another ace-x. But even that is a pretty tough spot. And so I don't think very much can call here. And not surprisingly, our opponent does fold. And we pick up a nice pot.